A young black teenager, just 15 years old, faced degrading treatment when he walked into a gun store. Within an hour, the situation would evolve in ways that left everyone stunned. "Hey kid, are you lost? The video game shop is on the other side of the road," said the clerk without even glancing up from his screen as Kevin entered Arsenal Premium, the town's most upscale firearms retailer. Kevin Williams, at only 15, never expected that a routine store visit would spark a transformation that would render the entire community speechless. Wearing casual jeans and a simple shirt, he appeared entirely misplaced among the display cabinets showcasing collector firearms and military gear worth more than automobiles. "I'm actually seeking information about concealed carry licenses," Kevin responded with composure that seemed beyond his years. The employee's mockery rang throughout the shop, drawing other workers' notice. "Licenses? You're too young to even get a driver's permit. Run along and play before I contact the authorities for loitering." The store manager, Rick Patterson, a hefty 52-year-old man, walked over with a patronizing grin. Patterson had established his local standing as someone who understood proper social hierarchy and maintained order. His establishment served only elite customers, wealthy business people, political figures, and affluent collectors. "What's the situation here?" Patterson examined Kevin from head to toe as though evaluating a potential threat. "Son, this establishment isn't meant for your type. We stock expensive inventory here." Kevin remained still, his gaze methodically taking in the firearms mounted on the walls. Something in his bearing, an almost supernatural calm for his age, should have warned him. However, Patterson and his staff were too preoccupied with their own biases. "I'm fully aware of where I am," Kevin answered, maintaining his respectful tone. "My father always told me that wisdom doesn't have an age limit." Mentioning his father caused Patterson to scoff. Right. And I suppose your dad is some major collector, correct? You people always fabricate these tales." What Patterson couldn't know was that each harsh comment and contemptuous look was being carefully stored in the mind of someone who had learned early that genuine power doesn't show itself through yelling or arguing, but through the calculated patience of those who understand when to wait for the perfect opportunity. A frequent patron, Attorney Morrison, laughed loudly. "Rick, you ought to install a sign saying qualified individuals only. That would prevent these uncomfortable encounters." Kevin acknowledged politely, "I appreciate the recommendation. I'll remember that." The statement seemed harmless, almost childlike, but anyone who noticed a resolute spark in his eyes, the kind of resolve found only in those carrying purposes far beyond what their age suggests, might have understood these weren't words of surrender, but of someone just starting a much more sophisticated game than anyone in that store could comprehend. If you experience the harsh sting of being evaluated by your looks, you understand that sometimes the most effective response doesn't come immediately, but arrives when they are least prepared for it. Follow our channel to discover how a 15-year-old was about to deliver a lesson none of those adults would ever forget. Did you document everything? Patterson laughed heartily, shaking his head at the other patrons. "Kid, you can't even comprehend those technical details. Go home and play war games before I run out of patience." Kevin continued examining the weapons on display, his attention fixed on a particular Glock 17. "That model features an upgraded tactical sight system," he stated calmly, indicating the firearm. "Military specification, correct?" The quiet that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds before Patterson erupted in laughter. "Military specification. Did everyone hear that? This boy's been watching too many war films." Morrison approached with renewed enthusiasm for the mockery. "Rick, allow me to educate the young gentleman here." He leaned down condescendingly. "Son, firearms aren't playthings. This is serious equipment for serious individuals, people who earn a living, pay their taxes, and contribute meaningfully to society." "I completely understand," Kevin replied, his voice remaining as steady as before, beginning to disturb some observers. "My father frequently discussed firearm responsibility." "Your father?" Patterson raised his eyebrows, sharing knowing looks with Morrison. "And what line of work is your father in?" "Security at the mall." The inquiry was met with subdued snickers from other customers. Kevin lowered his head slightly, but not from embarrassment. It was the same motion he made as a child, standing beside his father, watching veterans receive disrespect at official events from people who would never comprehend the burden of serving their nation. Colonel James Williams had instilled in his son that some conflict are won through honor, while others require strategic patience. Throughout 23 years of military duty, James had encountered 3 wars and numerous classified operations, always returning with the same philosophy. Kevin, my son, genuine strength isn't about demonstrating your power. It's about understanding the right moment to exercise that strength. James had passed away 6 months prior during an international humanitarian mission, leaving Kevin and his mother with a modest pension and a house filled with medals most people would never have the chance to earn. In his father's desk drawer, Kevin had discovered correspondence from generals, presidential photographs, and documentation proving a service legacy that people like Patterson could never grasp. He was in security work, Kevin responded, technically accurate while admitting that it was national security. Of course he was. Patterson dismissed. Always the identical story. You folks always invent these impressive careers to impress others. A new customer entered. A large man in expensive attire, clearly used to having his words respected. Patterson immediately shifted his behavior, adopting a servile manner. Mr. Thompson, wonderful to see you again. Thompson barely acknowledged him, his eyes fixed on Kevin with annoyance. Rick, what's the situation? I thought you maintained this establishment as selective. I was just handling that, Mr. Thompson. The boy was leaving. Kevin stood motionless, his eyes calmly moving between the faces, staring at him with increasing hostility. Something about his composure, a quietness inappropriate for his age, should have warned these men, but they were too absorbed in feeding their sense of superiority. Actually, Kevin said quietly, I still have questions about carry permits for legally emancipated minors. The statement struck the conversation like an explosion. Morrison laughed nervously. Emancipated minor? Kid, you don't appear old enough to operate a vehicle, much less carry a weapon. I'm 15 and received legal emancipation 3 months ago, Kevin replied with the same unnatural composure. I need to understand the legal requirements. Thompson frowned. Emancipated, and your parents consented to this. My father died serving his country. My mother supported the decision. The mention of his father's death created momentary discomfort, but Patterson quickly returned to his hostile demeanor. Listen, kid, I don't know what fiction you're creating, but this isn't a venue for legal games. This is legitimate business. Kevin nodded respectfully. That's precisely why I'm here. I want to handle everything properly. Properly? Thompson laughed bitterly. The proper thing would be for you to be in school, not disrupting business establishments with legal fantasies. What these men didn't realize was that Kevin had spent the previous 6 months thoroughly studying firearms legislation, legal procedures, and federal regulations, not from teenage curiosity, but because he had inherited more than his father's medals. He had also inherited a sense of justice that wouldn't tolerate being underestimated or humiliated without consequences. In the school bag he carried, which everyone assumed contained only assignments, Kevin kept certified copies of his emancipation documents, official correspondence about his father's military pension, and a recommendation letter signed by a 3-star general who had known James Williams personally. More significantly, Kevin had meticulously documented every discriminatory encounter he'd faced since his father's death. Every prejudiced remark, every closed door, every contemptuous glance had been recorded with the military precision his father had taught him. I understand your skepticism, Kevin said calmly, adjusting his backpack strap. Perhaps I should return with appropriate documentation. Patterson laughed one final time. Documentation? Sure, kid. Come back when you're mature enough for these discussions. Kevin nodded politely and walked toward the exit, but paused midway. Mr. Patterson, may I ask you something personal? What? Patterson replied, still smiling condescendingly. Did you ever serve in the military? The question caught Patterson off guard. No, never. Why? Kevin nodded slowly, as if processing crucial information. Just wondering. My dad always said you could identify who had served by how they treated others. The observation sounded innocent, almost philosophical. But something in Kevin's tone, a quiet certainty, made Patterson feel inexplicable discomfort, as if he had just failed an examination he didn't know he was taking. Every cruel word, Every contemptuous laugh, every condescending glance were being stored in the memory of someone who had learned early that the real battle doesn't occur during the moment of provocation, but in the quiet preparation that precedes ultimate victory. What those men couldn't perceive behind the calm eyes of a 15-year-old was a determination forged through military education and tempered by recent loss that had transformed the boy into something far more formidable than any of them could imagine. Kevin left Arsenal Premium without rushing, but his mind was already 3 moves ahead. In the parking lot, he dialed a number unused for months. Captain Rodriguez, this is Kevin Williams, Colonel James's son. On the other end, the weathered but firm voice of the veteran who had served under his father for 8 years responded immediately. Kevin, how are you holding up, son? I still can't believe we lost James. I'm managing, sir. I need assistance with a legal matter. Do you still have connections at the Department of Licensing and Regulation? Rodriguez paused briefly. Certainly. What do you need? Kevin quickly described the Arsenal Premium situation, omitting the most painful humiliation details but focusing on the irregularities he'd observed during his visit. Interesting, Rodriguez murmured. You know, your father taught me to always verify licenses of establishments we visited. Military habit. And coincidentally, I had concerns about Arsenal Premium for months. While Kevin spoke in the parking lot, inside the store, Patterson celebrated with Morrison and Thompson what they considered an easy victory. Did you see how that kid fled? Patterson laughed loudly, cleaning a collector's rifle. These people need to understand there are appropriate places for everyone. Thompson nodded approvingly. Exactly. If we start permitting just anyone inside, soon our select clientele will shop elsewhere. Morrison, always a perceptive attorney, raised an eyebrow. Didn't you find it odd that the boy mentioned emancipation and those specific licensing questions? Oh, please, Patterson dismissed with a gesture. These kids watch too much YouTube and think they understand law. He probably doesn't even know legal emancipation requires federal judge approval. What Patterson didn't realize was that Kevin not only knew this, he had completed the entire process 3 months earlier. After Kevin's father died, his mother, Nurse Sarah Williams, had insisted on emancipation so her son could directly access military benefits and make legal decisions regarding his father's military state. Federal Judge Harrison, a Vietnam veteran and personal friend of Colonel Williams, had processed the emancipation in record time after reviewing James's military record and Kevin's exceptional academic achievements. Rodriguez, Kevin continued on the phone, could you investigate whether Arsenal Premium complies with all federal protocols, especially those regarding service discrimination and document verification? I can do better, son. Your father saved my life twice. I'm calling my ATF contact, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. If there's any impropriety at that store, we'll discover it. Inside Arsenal Premium, Patterson boasted to a growing group of regular customers about how he had put the kid in his place. Today's problem is that young people don't understand hierarchy, Patterson declared, proudly polishing a custom gold pistol. In my time, you respected your superiors. Speaking of superiors, Morrison interjected maliciously. The kid asked if you served in the military. Didn't he? What was your response again? Patterson blushed slightly. The truth was he had attempted to enlist 3 times during his youth, only to be rejected for health reasons he had never publicly admitted. I served my country in other ways. Not every patriot must take up arms. Thompson laughed. Sure, Rick, you serve by selling guns to those who actually know how to use them. The joke drew general laughter, but created subtle discomfort in Patterson. Something about how Kevin had posed a question, an apparent innocence that seemed to carry greater weight. Meanwhile, Kevin drove home in his second-hand Honda Civic, a gift from his mother when he turned 15. In the garage, he opened a metal container holding his father's most precious belongings. Among the medals, a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, a Distinguished Service Cross. He found what he sought, a recommendation letter signed by General Mitchell Roberts, commander of a humanitarian operation where James Williams had died. Colonel Williams demonstrated exceptional leadership under extreme pressure, the letter stated. His son Kevin, who displays similar maturity and principles, has my unconditional support for any future endeavors. Kevin photographed a letter and sent it to Rodriguez along with copies of his emancipation papers and academic certificates. It wasn't arrogance. It was simply preparation, exactly as his father had taught him. Always have your documentation in order. Son, James used to say, well-documented truth is the most powerful weapon available. The phone rang. Rodriguez here. Kevin, I just finished speaking with my ATF contact. She's conducting a routine visit to Arsenal Premium tomorrow, and when she heard you were Colonel Williams' son, she became very interested in hearing your account. Thank you, Captain, but I want to handle this correctly. No special treatment. Rodriguez chuckled. Boy, you're exactly like your father. But let me tell you something. Sometimes doing things correctly means utilizing all legal resources available, and your father made many friends in significant positions. Kevin hung up and looked at the framed photograph of his father in military uniform. James Williams stared directly at the camera with the same calm, determined expression Kevin had worn in the store. In the kitchen, his mother Sarah was preparing dinner, still wearing her nurse's uniform after a 12-hour hospital shift. How did the gun store visit go? She asked without looking up from pot. Educational, Kevin replied simply. Sarah stopped stirring and turned to look at her son. She had worked emergency rooms long enough to recognize that particular tone, the calm before the storm. Kevin, your father always said the best revenge is living well and doing right. Don't become bitter because of ignorant people. I don't intend to become bitter, Mom. But I also don't intend to let them treat other young people the way they treated me today. Sarah nodded slowly. Something in her son's eyes, a determination inherited directly from his father, told her the situation was far from finished. Outside, a car with official plates slowly drove down the street, its occupant checking addresses on a clipboard. At Arsenal Premium, Patterson concluded his day counting money, completely unaware that every cruel word spoken hours earlier had initiated a series of events that would change his life forever. As he stored his father's medals, Kevin reflected on the difference between justice and revenge. One was emotional and impulsive, the other calculated and inevitable. Thanks to lessons from a decorated colonel and love from a mother who had raised a son to make a world difference, Kevin knew exactly which path to choose. Tomorrow will be very interesting at Arsenal Premium, and Patterson would finally discover that there are consequences for those who mistake dignity for weakness and respect for fear. The following morning, Patterson arrived at Arsenal Premium at 8 o'clock sharp, as he had done every day for 15 years. He donned his custom lab coat with the store logo embroidered on it, checked the cash register, and activated the security system, completely oblivious to the black sedan parked across the street. Federal Agent Lisa Chen observed the comings and goings through her sunglasses, a folder of documents on the passenger seat. A 10-year ATF veteran, she had conducted hundreds of inspections, but this one was special. The name Colonel James Williams opened doors most people didn't even know existed. At 9:15, Chen crossed the street with purposeful steps. The store bell announced her entrance, and Patterson looked up from his computer with his automatic business smile. Good morning. How may I assist you? Chen displayed her federal identification. Agent Chen, ATF, routine inspection to verify federal regulation compliance. Patterson's smile disappeared instantly. Inspection? But we passed our last audit 2 years ago. Inspections can occur anytime, Mr. Patterson. I need to examine your sales records, licenses, and customer service protocols. Morrison, who had arrived to purchase ammunition, witnessed the conversation and whispered nervously, Rick, what's happening? Patterson tried maintaining his composure, but his hands trembled slightly as he opened the license file. Certainly, Agent. We have everything in order here. Chen began methodically examining documents, making notes on her clipboard. I received a report about possible customer service discrimination. Do you have specific protocols for treating all customers equally? Discrimination? Patterson forced a nervous laugh. Absolutely not. We treat all customers with identical respect. Interesting. Chen retrieved a digital recorder from her briefcase. Then you wouldn't mind if I played some recordings from yesterday. Patterson's blood froze. Morrison stepped back, suddenly interested in examining wall-mounted guns. Kevin's clear voice echoed through the recorder. Actually, I'm looking for information on carry permits. followed by Patterson's cruel laughter. Permits? Kid, you can't even drive yet. Go play outside before I call the police for trespassing. Chen paused the recording. Is this your voice, Mr. Patterson? Well, the kid appeared suspicious. Suspicious? How? Chen pressed, eyebrows raised. Did he make threats? Display aggressive behavior. Patterson swallowed hard. Not exactly, but... Chen played more recording, including comments about people like you and cruel jokes about well-fine thrift stores. With each sentence, Patterson sank deeper into his chair. Mr. Patterson, Chen continued in a steady voice, the young man you humiliated yesterday is Kevin Williams, son of Colonel James Williams, killed in the line of duty 6 months ago. Kevin is legally emancipated and has a constitutional right to dignified treatment in commercial establishments. Morrison uttered a low curse. Patterson felt as if the floor had vanished beneath his feet. Colonel Williams. Patterson stammered, but the boy didn't mention. Why should he? Chen interrupted. Does a 15-year-old need to announce his deceased father's military record to receive basic courtesy? Chen opened an envelope and spread photographs across the counter. James Williams receiving medals, greeting generals at official White House ceremonies. Colonel Williams served 23 years, including 3 combat tours and classified missions. He died saving civilians in an international humanitarian operation. Chen fixed Patterson with a steel-cutting stare. And you mocked his son because he looked suspicious. Thompson, who had arrived to collect an order, witnessed the scene in growing silence, his face paper-pale. Chen continued relentlessly. Kevin recorded the entire interaction with the legal protection app he installed after facing repeated discrimination since his father's death. He has legal ground to sue this establishment for age and appearance-based discrimination. Patterson attempted a desperate defense. Agent Chen, it was a misunderstanding. If we had known who he was. If you had known who he was. Chen cut him off. Not who he is. A person's character doesn't change based on their parent profession or bank account. Chen produced more documents. Kevin Williams has an IQ of 142, a perfect GPA, and has already been accepted to 3 universities with full scholarships. He is also certified in first aid and has saved 2 people from drowning while volunteering as a lifeguard. Each fact struck Patterson's face like a slap. The suspicious boy he had humiliated was more qualified and educated than most adult clients. Furthermore, Chen continued, our investigation revealed that this establishment charges different prices based on customer appearance. This violates federal trade regulations. Morrison tried hiding behind a bookcase, but Chen had noticed him. Mr. Morrison, correct? Attorney, you were present during the discrimination and actively encouraged the behavior. Morrison opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. Chen closed the folder with a definitive sound. Arsenal Premium is under federal investigation. Licenses will be reviewed, and there's high probability of temporary operational suspension. Patterson slumped in his chair. 15 years building the business, and it was all crumbling because of a few minutes of gratuitous cruelty toward a teenager. Agent Chen, Patterson pleaded, can't we work something out? I can compensate the boy. Compensate? Chen laughed coldly. Mr. Patterson, Kevin Williams doesn't want your money. He wants justice. And justice is exactly what he'll receive. The store bell rang, and Kevin entered calmly, wearing the same simple clothes as the previous day. But now, with Chen at his side and the truth revealed, his presence carried completely different weight. Patterson looked at Kevin with new eyes, no longer seeing a suspicious kid but the son of an American hero, a brilliant young man who had been cruelly judged by appearance. Kevin, Chen said respectfully, do you need anything else of the report? Kevin looked directly at Patterson. No, Agent Chen. I believe the message has been conveyed. Thompson, Morrison, and Patterson remained silent, finally understanding they had seriously underestimated not only Kevin but the consequences of their own prejudices. Outside, another federal sedan arrived, carrying additional investigators. Arsenal Premium was about to discover that discriminating against an American hero's son had ramifications extending far beyond their small, prejudiced minds. And Kevin Williams, at 15 years old, had just proven that dignity and respect aren't privileges granted based on appearance, but fundamental rights he was willing to defend with the same courage his father had shown on the battlefield. 3 months after the federal investigation, Arsenal Premium permanently closed. Patterson lost not only his federal firearms license, but also faced a tax audit revealing irregularities dating back 5 years. His mortgage, home, and personal savings evaporated in legal fees and federal fines. Morrison had his law license suspended for 6 months after the Bar Association discovered his active involvement in documented discrimination. His most important clients migrated to other firms, leaving him working smaller cases to rebuild his ruined reputation. Thompson saw his government contracts canceled when the investigation revealed his company also engaged in systematic hiring discrimination. The man who prided himself on maintaining selectivity found that his own exclusive practices had become his biggest business nightmare. Kevin Williams, however, transformed the experience into something far greater than personal revenge. With support from military veterans and civil rights lawyers, he established the Colonel James Williams Foundation, an organization dedicated to combating discrimination against minority youth in commercial establishments. The foundation provides free legal assistance for discrimination cases, civil rights education for teenagers, and mentoring program connecting young people with military veterans. In just 3 months, the organization had successfully sued 12 establishments for discriminatory practices and achieved customer service policy reforms at over 50 companies. Kevin was accepted into the military academy on full academic merit scholarship, following his father's footsteps, but now with a personal mission to ensure others didn't face the same prejudice he had experienced. During the foundation's opening ceremony at the local university auditorium, over 300 people attended, including generals, veterans, local officials, and dozens of young people who had faced similar discrimination. My father always taught me that true strength isn't about responding with anger, but about transforming injustice into positive change, Kevin told an emotional audience. When those men humiliated me in that store, they didn't realize they were planting seed for something much greater than their own ignorance. In the audience, sitting front row, Sarah Williams watched her son with tears of pride. Beside her, Captain Rodriguez whispered, "James would be so proud." The boy didn't just honor his father's memory, he multiplied his legacy. The final irony came weeks later when Patterson tried securing employment at a sporting goods store. The manager, a young black man in his 20s, recognized his name during the interview. "Mr. Patterson, isn't it? I read about your Arsenal Premium situation." The young man paused, reviewing the resume. "Unfortunately, our policy prohibits hiring people with documented discrimination histories. I hope you understand." Patterson left the interview understanding for the first time how his own actions had created the barriers he now faced. The humiliation he had inflicted on Kevin had returned to him multiplied, but this time accompanied by a lesson he would carry for life. Kevin had learned something not all military handbooks teach. Sometimes the most complete victory isn't destroying the enemy, but transforming the entire battlefield. He hadn't only defended his own dignity, he had created a system to protect the dignity of everyone who came after him. 2 years later, when Kevin graduated as a second lieutenant from a military academy, Patterson watched the ceremony on local television. The young man he had dismissed as a suspicious kid now appeared saluting generals and being praised for exceptional academic merit. In that moment, Patterson finally understood he had not only judged wrongly but had wasted an opportunity to know someone extraordinary simply because his prejudices exceeded his humanity. Kevin's true revenge wasn't Patterson's destruction, but building a legacy ensuring future generations wouldn't face the same disrespect. He transformed 3 minutes of humiliation into decades of positive change. The lesson Kevin Williams taught transcends issues of race, age, or social class. When facing injustice, we can choose to respond with bitterness or build bridges to a more just world. Kevin chose to build, and in the process, he honored not only his father's memory but redefined what it means to transform pain into purpose. If you've ever faced discrimination or witnessed someone treated unfairly, you understand that sometimes the best response isn't the most obvious one. Follow our channel for more stories proving that dignity, education, and determination are the most powerful weapons against prejudice. True victory comes from lifting not just yourself but the entire society around you.